My name is Javier, and until last month, I worked the graveyard shift as a cleaner on the MS Irene, a luxury cruise ship crossing the Atlantic. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid decently, and I liked the solitude of the empty halls after midnight, just me, my mop, and the hum of the ship's engines. That changed on night 3 of the voyage when I first heard the phone ring in cabin 737. It was 2:44 a.m. sharp. I remember because I just checked my watch, annoyed that my break was still 6 minutes away. The ring was shrill, unnatural, like it was dialed up louder than the other cabins. I picked up, expecting a drunk passenger who'd stumbled into the wrong room. Instead, I heard breathing, wet, ragged, like someone drowning in air. Then, silence. The line went dead. I shrugged it off, maybe a prank or a glitch in the ship's ancient phone system. But the next night, same time, same cabin, same single ring. This time, the breathing was louder, more desperate. My skin prickled. I radioed the front desk, asking if they'd transferred a call. 737's vacant, the clerk said, sounding bored. Has been all season. I checked the door myself. It was locked with 2 heavy padlocks, the kind used for storage or quarantine. A sticky note on the frame read out of service in faded ink. The peephole was dark, but as I leaned in, I swear I felt warm air seep through the crack below the door, like the room itself was exhaling. By the 5th night, I'd started avoiding Deck 7 altogether, taking the long way around to clean the lounges. But at 2:43 a.m., my radio crackled to life, static. Then a voice I didn't recognize whispered, "Javier, answer me." The shock of hearing my own name froze me mid-step. The second the clock hit 2:44, cabin 737's phone rang again, louder, angrier, like it was vibrating the walls. This time, I didn't pick up. I just stared at the door, and that's when I saw it. The padlocks were rusted, crusted with something dark and flaky. Blood? My hand shook as I touched one, and a metallic smell hit me like old pennies in salt water. Behind me, a floorboard creaked. I spun around, but the hallway was empty, except for the faint sound of knocking, not from 737, but inside it. I finally snapped and went to my supervisor, Marcos, a grizzled ex-Navy guy who'd worked the ship for a decade. He laughed at first, calling me unhuman con imagination, until I showed him the rusted locks. His smile died. He pulled up cabin 737's records on his tablet, then paled. "This can't be right," he muttered. The system showed it as permanently decommissioned after an incident 2 months prior. No details, just a red classified stamp. Marcos's hands weren't steady as he unlocked the door. The smell hit us first, mildew and something sour, like spoiled meat. The lights flickered, even though the breaker box outside read off. And the bed. God, the bed. The sheets were pristine, but the mattress sagged deep, too deep, as if something heavy had been pressing down for years. Marcos aimed his flashlight at the walls, and that's when we saw them: claw marks. Deep, frantic grooves dug into the wallpaper, some flecked with dried brown streaks. They started at shoulder height and dragged all the way down to the floor, like someone had been pulled against their will. My stomach turned. I crouched to inspect one, and my fingers came away sticky. The air grew thicker, colder, and for a second, I heard it again, that same wet breathing, right beside my ear. Marcos didn't react. He was too busy staring at the nightstand, where a thin layer of dust covered everything except the phone. It looked wiped clean, the receiver slightly off the hook. "This room hasn't been touched in months," he whispered. "So why does it smell like sweat?" Back at his office, Marcos pulled up the incident logs, his face lit by the blue glare of the monitor. The file was sparse. Passenger number 4471, male, 38. Found deceased in cabin 737. Cause of death, cardiac arrest, extreme stress. But the attached photo made me gag. The man's face was frozen in pure terror, his lips blue, eyes bulging. And his hands, Christ, his fingertips were shredded, nails ripped off, blood smeared across his palms like he'd tried to pry open something. The report noted one other detail. The phone was clutched against his chest, the cord wrapped around his wrist. Marcos slammed the laptop shut. "We're sealing that room forever," he said. But it was too late. That night, as I mopped Deck 5, the hallway lights flickered. And from a nearby courtesy phone, I heard a ring. On the 7th night, I woke up screaming in my bunk before my alarm even went off. My sheets were soaked with sweat, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. In my dream, I'd been back in 737, but this time the walls were bleeding, and the phone wouldn't stop ringing. When I checked my watch at 2:43 a.m., I nearly vomited. I grabbed my radio to call Marcos, but all I got was static and that same whispered voice. "You shouldn't have looked, Javier." That's when I noticed my hands. Under each fingernail, dark crescent moons of dirt, like I'd been clawing at something. But I hadn't. I ran to the bathroom, scrubbing furiously, when suddenly all the sinks turned on by themselves, the water rushing out rust brown and reeking of copper. I don't remember collapsing in the hallway, but crew members found me at 3 a.m., curled into a fetal position near the service elevator, babbling about the man in the walls. They said I was ice cold to the touch, my lips blue like the dead passengers. The ship's doctor sedated me, and when I woke up, Marcos was there with security. "You're being relieved of duty," he said, avoiding my eyes. As they escorted me to the medical launch, I glanced back at Deck 7. In the porthole of 737, a shadow moved, not human, but something stretched too long, its fingers splayed against the glass. The last thing I heard was Marcos muttering, "We're going to weld that damn door shut," but we both knew it wouldn't matter. Some doors shouldn't be opened, and some calls shouldn't be answered. Back in Lisbon, I spent 3 weeks in a psychiatric ward. The doctors called it maritime psychosis, but they couldn't explain why my medical charts showed hypothermia when I'd been indoors, or why my fingernails kept breaking, as if they'd been worn down by something coarse. The worst part? My phone would sometimes ring at 2:44 a.m., and when I'd answer, like an idiot, I'd hear that same wet breathing before the call dropped. I changed numbers 5 times before realizing the calls weren't coming from any number at all. My therapist suggested I write about the experience as exposure therapy, but when I tried, the pages would inexplicably dampen, the ink bleeding into Rorschach blots that looked disturbingly like a face screaming, "Last month." I got an email from a crewmate who's still on the Irene. He attached a passenger complaint from cabin 738, the room adjacent to 737. A woman claimed she'd been woken by knocking on the shared wall, followed by a phone call with no caller ID. When she answered, a male voice whispered, "Tell Javier to pick up." The timestamp? 2:44 a.m. exactly. My friend told me they've had 6 similar reports this year alone, always from cabins near 737. The company's solution? They've removed all phones from those rooms. But here's what haunts me. The passenger swore the voice didn't come from the receiver, but from inside her closet, where they later found scratch marks identical to the ones we saw that night. I tracked down the sister of passenger number 4471. The dead man. She showed me his last journal entry, written hours before he died, day 17 of hearing the breathing. Captain says no one's in 737, but tonight I saw him through the peephole, a man shaped like shadows, his mouth sewn shut with fishing wire. He's been calling my name since Liverpool. The crew thinks I'm mad, but I know what I heard when I picked up that phone. It wasn't static. It was the sea. Reading those words, my blood turned to ice. Because on my last night aboard, I'd heard something similar during that final call, a distant, watery gurgling beneath the breathing, like a voice trying to surface from deep underwater. The Irene docks in Barcelona next week. Sometimes I think about buying a ticket, about facing whatever's in that room. But then I remember how the mattress indent looked less like someone had lain there, and more like something had been pressing down from above. Last Tuesday, my new landlady asked why all my mirrors are covered with sheets. I didn't tell her about the times I've woken to see breath fogging the glass when I'm not exhaling, or about the faint numbers that sometimes appear in the condensation, 737. The calls have stopped, but now when my digital clock hits 2:44, the display glitches, showing 737 for exactly 3 seconds before correcting itself. I keep the lights on all night, and I never, ever answer the phone. I never believed in ghosts, not really. But the Ocean Serenade changed that. It was my first cruise, a solo trip to find myself after a messy breakup. The ship was massive, all glittering chandeliers and endless buffets, but something about it felt off. Maybe it was the way the crew avoided eye contact when I asked about the ship's history, or how the laughter in the bars always died down just a little too quickly. On the second night, I stumbled into the game lounge after 2 mini rum punches, my head buzzing. That's when I saw it, a door, half hidden behind a slot machine. No sign, just a dimly lit stairwell leading down. The air around it was colder, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. And yet, I swear I heard waves crashing below me, impossible, since I was already on the lowest passenger deck. Curiosity got the better of me. I pushed the door open wider, the hinges groaning like they hadn't been used in years. The stairs were narrow, the walls lined with peeling paint and what looked like old water stains, except they were too dark, too thick, like rust. My phone flashlight flickered as I descended, casting jagged shadows. Then I saw her. At the far end of the hallway, a woman in a white dress stood perfectly still, her back to me, long black hair swaying slightly as if caught in a breeze. But there was no breeze. The air was dead. My stomach dropped. "Hello?" I called out, my voice bouncing off the walls. She didn't turn, didn't move, just kept staring out a porthole at the black ocean. That's when I noticed the porthole was broken, cracked from the inside, like something had been thrown against it. And below it, scratched into the wall, were two words: "Help her." I froze, my fingers digging into the stair rail. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The woman's dress was wrong, not modern cruise wear, but something from decades ago, yellowed at the edges like old lace. In the way she stood, her feet weren't quite touching the floor. A whisper brushed past my ear, so close I felt breath on my neck. Mine. I spun around, but the hallway was empty. When I looked back, the woman was gone. Only the porthole remained, the cracks now forming a spiderweb pattern. My phone chose that moment to die, plunging me into darkness. I bolted up the stairs, shoulder slamming into the door, but it wouldn't budge. Locked. From the other side, a child's giggle echoed, high-pitched and wet, like they'd been drowning. I don't know how long I pounded on that door. Eventually, a crew member found me, drenched in sweat. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered, avoiding the stairwell entirely. His name tag read Luis, 12 years service. When I asked about the woman, his face went gray. "No deck 13 on the ship," he said too quickly, guiding me away. But later, in my cabin, I found a crumpled maintenance slip stuck to my shoe, a work order from 2018, detailing odor complaints, Deck 13, Section B. The handwriting was frantic, with a scribbled note at the bottom: "She won't let us seal it." That night, I woke to a dragging sound outside my door. Something bumped against it, rhythmic, like a body being pulled. Then, a child's voice, muffled through the metal: "Mommy says come play." The next morning, I tried to convince myself it had been a nightmare until I saw the handprint. A small, perfect imprint of a child's fingers on my cabin window, facing inward, as if someone had pressed against the glass from outside. My blood turned ice. I rushed to the ship's library, digging through old newspapers on microfilm. After hours of searching, I found it, a tiny article from 2015 about a tragic accident aboard the Ocean Serenade. A 4-year-old boy had fallen from his balcony while his mother slept. The photo showed a woman in a white dress screaming as crew members held her back, the same woman I'd seen. The article never mentioned Deck 13, but I noticed something chilling. The family's original cabin assignment had been edited out, blacked out like classified information, that afternoon. I drank 3 espressos to steady my hands and went back to the game lounge. The hidden door was now bolted shut with a shiny new padlock. When I asked the bartender about it, he dropped a glass. "Don't," he hissed, wiping his palms on his apron. "Last guy who kept asking. He's gone." He refused to say more, but later, I found a note slipped under my door, a crude map drawn on napkin, showing Deck 13's layout. One room was circled in red, *storage B, 13. The handwriting matched the maintenance slip. At 3 a.m., when the ship was silent, I returned. The padlock was gone. The door creaked open like it had been waiting. The air smelled like salt and something metallic. Then I heard it, a slow, wet dragging sound coming from the darkness ahead. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, the walls oozing condensation that streaked like tears. My flashlight revealed dozens of tiny handprints smeared along the baseboards. At the end stood Storage B, 13, its doors slightly ajar. Inside, stacked life jackets formed a grotesque nest on the floor, stained brown with age or something else. In the center lay a single child's shoe crusted with salt crystals. The whispering started then, voices overlapping. "Look down. She's coming." Jumped but didn't fall. Suddenly, the life jackets rustled. Something crawled out from beneath them, a pale, skeletal hand, fingers too long, nails blackened and broken. I stumbled backward into the hallway just as the storage door slammed shut behind me with a final, echoing boom. I ran blindly, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The stairwell door was locked again. Panicking, I pounded until my fist bruised, then froze. Cold fingers brushed my ankle. Looking down, I saw a child's face grinning up from between the steps railings, his skin bloated and blue, hair floating as if underwater. "You found my mom," he gurgled, black liquid dripping from his smile. Behind me, the woman in white materialized, her dress now torn and streaked with algae. Her eyes were voids. The temperature plummeted. I screamed as her hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. Her touch burned like dry ice. In that moment, I understood. They didn't want help. They wanted company. The deck numbers on the walls began to bleed, the 12 and 14 melting away until only 13 remained, carved deep into the steel. I woke up in the infirmary, my wrists bandaged. The doctor said I'd been found passed out near the crew elevators, mumbling about the boy in the walls. Security insisted Deck 13 didn't exist. But when they discharged me, I noticed the nurse's logbook. My intake form listed my location as D13, Starboard Hall. The nurse quickly scratched it out. On the last night, I packed in a frenzy. As I zipped my suitcase, the TV flickered to static, then showed grainy surveillance footage. A man in a cruise staff uniform, Luis, the bartender, standing in a dim hallway, staring at something off camera. His mouth opened unnaturally wide, jaw unhinging like a snake's, and a woman's voice came out. "You'll remember us." The feed cut to the ship's cheerful safety video as if nothing had happened. Back on land, I tried to forget. Then the email started. No subject, just attachments. Blueprints of Deck 13's original layout, marked with a red X where storage B13 would be. The last one contained a photo, a family portrait of a woman in white, her son, and a man in a captain's uniform. Their faces were scratched out. The timestamp read June 13, 2015. I showed it to a maritime historian. He turned pale. "That's Captain Alvarez," he said. "He vanished the same night that boy died. They found his hat on Deck 13, which wasn't supposed to exist." My hand shook as I pulled up the ship's current roster. The bartender's name wasn't Luis. It was Alvarez. I contacted the cruise line, demanding answers. They offered me free future voyages, hush money. But the nightmares didn't stop. Every night at 1:13 a.m., my phone would ring. No caller ID, just static, then a child singing "Ring Around the Rosie" before the line went dead. Then came the dreams. I'm back on Deck 13, but now the walls are made of portholes, each one showing a different passenger sleeping in their cabin. The woman in white points at them and whispers they'll all meet him soon. Last week, I saw a news segment. The Ocean's Serenade had retired early. No explanation, but I know why. In the background of the report, blurred but unmistakable, stood a woman in a white dress. On the pier, waving. I moved inland, far from any ocean. But sometimes, when I'm near a pool or even a bathtub, I see bubbles rise for no reason. And once, after a rainstorm, I found tiny wet footprints leading to my doorstep, small enough to be a child's. The email stopped, but I still check Deck 13's status on maritime databases. It's listed as sealed permanently. Yet last month, a crew forum had a new post from a user named Luis_Alvarez_2015, a single photo of a storage room door, slightly ajar, with a child's hand visible in the crack. The caption read, "We're adding new guests soon. I don't sail anymore, but I know they're still there, and they're hungry." My name's Daniel, and back in 2019, I was 28, working a soul-crushing IT job, and desperately in need of a break. When my buddy Jake bailed on our cruise last minute, I almost canceled, but screw it, I went solo. The ocean's dream was a floating paradise, buffets, karaoke, and enough booze to drown my work stress. But by day 3, I'd trade every margarita in the world to unsee what happened near cabin 1046. It started with the couple next door, Liz and Mark, honeymooners from Ohio. Around 2:30 a.m., they banged on my door, faces pale under the hallway's flickering fluorescence. "You hear that?" Liz hissed, pointing at 1046. At first, nothing. Then thud, 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 like fists hammering a wall in Morse code. Then whispers, not conversation, but pleading, frantic and wet, like someone choking back tears. Then silence. Not peaceful, the kind that prickles your neck. Mark called security, but when they arrived, the officer just chuckled. Probably the TV. But TVs don't whimper. And they don't leave behind a key, still warm on the desk. The security team left after 5 minutes, their flashlights cutting through the dark like they were checking for monsters under a kid's bed. Liz kept staring at 1040 SIX's door, her fingers digging into Mark's arm. "That wasn't just noise," she whispered. "Someone was begging in there." I tried to laugh it off. Maybe a drunk fight, maybe bad plumbing, but my gut knew better. Back in my cabin, I couldn't sleep. The AC hummed like static, and every creak of the ship made me jerk upright. Around 4 a.m., a sharp click echoed from the hall. I peeked through the peephole just in time to see a man in a crew uniform stride past, tall, with a gait too smooth, like his knees didn't bend right. His cap shadowed his face, but I'll never forget his hands. Gloved, spotless. Not a wrinkle, not a stain. Like he'd never worked a day in his life. By sunrise, the ship was buzzing. A 22-year-old woman, Emily, according to the staff's hushed gossip, had vanished from 1046. No note, no struggle, just her phone charging on the nightstand and her sandals lined up neatly by the bed. The real nightmare? The cameras. The security chief, a guy with a voice like gravel, admitted the footage from 2:17 to 3:03 a.m. was unrecoverable. Not deleted, not corrupted, just gone. When I mentioned the crewman I'd seen, his pen froze mid-note. Describe him. But the moment I said gloves, his face shut down. Don't discuss this with other passengers. Not a request. A warning. That's when I noticed it, the smell. Inside 1046, beneath lemon disinfectant, something metallic lingered. Like a penny held too long in a clenched fist. By noon, the ship's atmosphere had shifted. Passengers whispered in clusters, casting nervous glances at the crew. The staff, usually all smiles, moved like ghosts, eyes down, lips tight. I tried cornering a bartender, a guy who'd been chatty the night before, but he just wiped a glass raw and muttered, "You didn't see anything," like it was a mantra. Meanwhile, Liz and Mark were suddenly unavailable, their cabin empty, their dinner reservations canceled. When I asked at guest services, the woman behind the desk didn't even look up. They disembarked early. Bullshit. Their luggage was still in their room, Liz's bright pink suitcase propped open like a scream. That night, I dug deeper. The ship's library had a computer no one used, tucked behind travel guides. A quick search for Ocean's Dream disappearances pulled up a forum thread from 2015. 2 women, both solo travelers, both vanished from inside cabins. Same details, locked doors, untouched belongings, missing footage. The last post was a reply from someone named X, Crew, 2016. "They'll offer you free drinks to shut up. Don't take them." My blood turned ice. Because earlier, a steward had left champagne in my room. Complimentary, the note said. The bottle was unopened. The strawberries beside it? Bruised soft, like something had pressed into them. Hard that I didn't touch the champagne. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. The way the strawberries oozed dark juice onto the napkin, the way the condensation on the bottle didn't bead like it should. That night, I barricaded my door with the dresser and slept with the bathroom light on. At 2:17 a.m. exactly, I'd been staring at my phone's clock. The AC cut out. The sudden silence was worse than any noise. Then came the scratching. Not at the door, but at the vent above my bed. Slow, deliberate drags of something metal against metal. I held my breath until my lungs burned. The moment I heard a wet, guttural whisper from the vent, "You're not supposed to look," the AC kicked back on, drowning it out. Morning brought no comfort. The vent cover was slightly ajar, with 3 deep gouges in the metal. When I reported it, the maintenance guy just nodded and replaced it without questions. That's when I noticed the pattern. Every staff member I spoke to had the same slight limp in their right leg. Same as the gloved man. The ship's doctor claimed it was a common occupational injury, but his eyes darted to the ceiling when he said it. I spent the day searching for Liz and Mark, finally spotting them at dinner, except they weren't eating. Just sitting, staring at their plates. When I called Liz's name, she turned with this awful, empty smile. "We're fine," she said in a voice that wasn't hers. "You should enjoy your cruise." Mark's hand clamped around her wrist so tight her skin turned white. The next night, I found the first note slipped under my door. Just coordinates and a time. 3:03 a.m. Deck 7, near the lifeboats. The handwriting was shaky, like someone writing with their offhand. I almost didn't go, but then I heard the familiar thudding through the wall, this time from cabin 1048, previously empty. At deck 7, the wind nearly tore the note from my hands. That's when I saw her, Emily, the missing girl, standing by the railing in nothing but a soaked nightgown. Her lips were blue, her hair stringy with salt water. "They're not crew," she whispered. Then the deck lights flickered, and she was gone. In her place stood 3 figures in crew uniforms, their faces smooth and featureless like mannequins. The tallest held out a glove. "Your room key, sir?" I ran. Not to my cabin, they'd expect that, but to the engine room, where the noise might cover me. The metal stairs burned my palms as I descended into the ship's belly. That's where I found the logbook. Page after page of names, dates, and cabin numbers. Always women, always solo travelers. The most recent entry was mine. Someone had drawn a circle around it in red ink. The sound of polished shoes on metal grating sent me bolting to the service elevator. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of the gloved man. He wasn't chasing me, just smiling. The elevator didn't stop at my floor. It went down, further down than the ship's schematics showed possible. When the doors opened, the smell hit me first, salt and copper and something sweetly rotten. The room was lined with lockers like a morgue. Some stood slightly ajar, revealing clothes neatly folded inside. A pink suitcase identical to Liz's. A passport with Emily's photo, but the name was different. At the far end, a figure in a crew uniform was sewing something at a table. Not until I stepped closer did I realize it was Mark. His fingers moved mechanically, stitching what looked like human skin onto a uniform jacket. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. "They always need more crew," he said without looking up. Behind me, the elevator dinged. 3 sets of polished shoes clicked against the floor. I woke up in my cabin with no memory of returning. My suitcase was packed, my boarding pass on the pillow. The TV played a loop of smiling passengers. When I tried to tell the debarkation crew what happened, they just nodded. "Rough seas cause strange dreams," one said, her right leg slightly stiff as she walked away. The security footage? Lost due to technical difficulties. Now, 3 years later, I get emails from Ocean Dream Cruises. Special offers. Solo traveler discounts. Last week, a package arrived, a crew uniform, perfectly tailored to my measurements. The gloves were spotless. And when I tried to throw them away, I found them back in my drawer the next morning, folded neatly, waiting.